Hello, Year A. This is your lesson 3 of Animal Farm, looking at chapter 3. So pop down your title. I think that most of you should be doing this on Monday the 30th of March, but if I've got that wrong, just pop down whatever today's date is. And you can see kind of how I formatted my page for this one, but for the top bit, I've left about 4 lines and then one at the bottom there. I would like you to write a very quick chapter summary of chapters 1 and 2 to remind yourself of what you should have read and understood last week. And then final thing before we move on to the reading is to write down the definition of comrade. So just to remind yourself of really key information before we move on. So write down the subheadings, pause the video, and then when you're ready to carry on, press start. Okay, so on with the text. Chapter 3, we're on page 19. So, how they toiled and sweated to get the hay in. So toiled means to work extremely hard. That's your first key word today. So pop that one down. Toiled, or to toil. Toiled, past tense, otherwise you toil. To work extremely hard. How they toiled and sweated to get the hay in. But their efforts were rewarded, for the harvest was an even bigger success than they had hoped. So, there's your first point for your key events. See, we haven't got characters this time, purely because you've been introduced to all the characters, so you don't need to reintroduce them. But our first point today is that the animals complete the harvest in record time. The animals complete the harvest in record time. Sometimes the work was hard. The implements had been designed for human beings and not for animals, and it was a great drawback that no animal was able to use any tool that involved standing on his hind legs. But the pigs were so clever that they could think of a way round every difficulty. As for the horses, they knew every inch of the field, and in fact understood the business of mowing and raking far better than Jones and his men had done. The pigs did not actually work, but directed and supervised the others. With their superior knowledge, it was natural that they should assume the leadership. Okay, there's your next point there. So at this point, the pigs are using their superior intelligence to take control. Okay, the pigs are using their superior intelligence to take control. Boxer and Clover would harness themselves to the cutter or the horse rake. No bits or reins were needed in these days, of course, and tramp steadily round and round the field, with a pig walking behind and calling out, "Jab, comrade!" or "Whoa back, comrade!" as the case may be. And every animal, down to the humblest, worked at turning the hay and gathering it. Even the ducks and hens toiled to and fro all day in the sun, carrying tiny wisps of hay in their beaks. In the end, they finished the harvest in 2 days less time than it had. And it had usually taken Jones and his men. Moreover, it was the biggest harvest that the farm had ever seen. There was no wastage whatever. The hens and ducks with their sharp eyes had gathered at the very last stalk, and not an animal on the farm had stolen so much as a mouthful. All through the summer, the work of the farm went like clockwork. The animals were happy as they had never conceived it possible to be. Every mouthful of food was an acute, positive pleasure, now that it was truly their own food, produced by themselves and for themselves, not doled out to them by a grudging master. With the worthless, parasitical human beings gone, there was more for everyone to eat. Okay, parasitical means to live off another. It's like being a parasite. So like a parasite literally lives off another living host. So like a flea is a parasite, or a nit, or if you get worms, they're parasites, or leeches, they're parasites. So a parasite lives off another human being, and that's how the human beings are being described. There was more leisure too, inexperienced though the animals were. They met with many difficulties. For instance, later in the year when they harvested the corn, they had to tread it out in the ancient style and blow away the chaff with their breath, since the farm possessed no threshing machine. Okay, so the chaff are the sort of husks of corn that you don't want because they can't be ground down, and a threshing machine would normally remove the seeds from the stalks, but because they don't have access to that machine, they've just got to sort of blow to separate the good from the bad bits. But the pigs, with their cleverness, and Boxer with his tremendous muscles, always pulled them through. Boxer was the admiration of everybody. He'd been a hard worker even in Jones's time, but now he seemed like 3 horses more than one. There were days when the entire work of the farm seemed to rest upon his mighty shoulders. From morning to night, he was pushing and pulling, always at the spot where the work was hardest. He'd made an arrangement with one of the cockerels to call him in the morning half an hour earlier than anybody else, and would put in some volunteer labour at whatever seemed to be the most needed, before the regular day's work began. His answer to every problem, every setback, was, "I will work harder," which he had adopted as his personal motto. But everybody worked according to his capacity. The hens and ducks, for instance, saved 5 bushels of corn at the harvest by gathering up the stray grains, so they had 5 bundles of corn. Nobody stole. Nobody grumbled over his rations. The quarrelling and biting and jealousy, which had been normal features of life in the old days, had almost disappeared. Nobody shirked, or almost nobody. Molly, it was true, was not good at getting up in the mornings, and had a way of leaving work early on the ground that there was a stone in her hoof. And the behaviour of the cat was somewhat peculiar. It was soon noticed that when there was work to be done, the cat could never be found. She had vanished for hours on end and then reappear at meal times or in the evening after the work was over, as though nothing had happened. But she always made such excellent excuses and purred so affectionately. It was impossible not to believe in her good intentions. Old Benjamin, the donkey, seemed quite unchanged since the rebellion. He did his work in the same slow, obstinate way that he had done in Jones's time, never shirking and never volunteering for extra work either. So obstinate is sort of stubborn refusal to ever change. About the rebellion and its results, he would express no opinion. When asked whether he was happier now that Jones was gone, he would say only, "Donkeys live a long time. None of you have ever seen a dead donkey." And the others had to be content with his cryptic answer. So cryptic, sort of mysterious and unclear. On Sundays, there was no work. Breakfast was an hour later than usual, and after breakfast there was a ceremony. There was a ceremony which was observed every week without fail. First came the hoisting of the flag. Snowball had found in the harness room an old green tablecloth of Mrs. Jones's, and had painted on it a hoof and a horn in white. This was run up the flagstaff in the farmhouse garden every Sunday morning. The flag was green, Snowball explained, to represent the green fields of England, while the hoof and horn signified the future republic of the animals which would uprise when the human race had been finally overthrown. Okay, 2 things then that we want to write down. So, we've got that the animals have lots to eat and get Sunday off. And but there is a raising of the flag ceremony. So we've got these 2 here. I think I put this one in the wrong order. I think I've got a bit ahead of myself. So the animals have lots to eat and get Sundays off. And there is a raising of the flag ceremony with a symbolic flag of a hoof and a horn on a green field. So we've got these 2 other next bits to add on to the list of what happened. After the hoisting of the flag, all the animals trooped into the big barn for a general assembly, which was known as the meeting. Here the work of the coming week was planned out and resolutions were put forward and debated. It was always the pigs who put forward the resolutions. The other animals understood how to vote, but could never think of any resolutions of their own. Snowball and Napoleon were by far the most active in the debates, but it was noticed that these two were never in agreement. Whatever suggestion either of them made, the other could be counted on to oppose it. So oppose means to go against or disagree. Okay, that's our next key word for our margin. Oppose, to disagree. Even when it was resolved, a thing nobody could reject in itself, to set aside a small paddock behind the orchard as a home of rest for animals who were past work. There was a stormy debate over the correct retiring age for each class of animal. The meeting always ended with the singing of Beasts of England, and the afternoon was given up to recreation. The pigs had set aside the harness room as a headquarters for themselves. Here in the evenings they studied blacksmithing, carpentering and other necessary arts from the books they had brought out of the farmhouse. So if you remember, one of the original rules was to basically not act like a human, to not become like a human. And yet what the pigs are actually now doing is they're studying all of these human crafts. So to be a blacksmith is to work with iron and mould iron. So to make horses' hooves, for example. Carpentry is using wood to make things, like making tables or chairs or stools. And they're finding all that information in the human books. Snowball also busied himself with organising the other animals into what he called animal committees. He was indefatigable at this. So if you're indefatigable, you will not get tired. He never ever tires of trying to organise these little committees. He formed the Egg Production Committee for the hens, the Clean Tails League for the cows, the Wild Comrades Re-Education Committee. The object of this was to tame the rats and rabbits, the Whiter Wool Movement for the sheep, and various others, besides instituting classes in reading and writing. On the whole, these projects were a failure. The attempt to tame the wild creatures, for instance, broke down almost immediately. They continued to behave very much as before, and when treated with generosity, simply took advantage of it. The cat joined the Re-Education Committee and was very active in it for some days. She was seen one day sitting on a roof and talking to some sparrows who were just out of her reach. She was telling them that all the animals were comrades, and that any sparrow who chose to come and perch on her paw, and any sparrow who chose could come and perch on her paw. But the sparrows kept their distance. Okay, so that's this point that I put in the wrong place. So here what we see is that a literacy program starts, but it's too hard for most of the animals. Oh no, we're not at that point. Ignore me. What we're at is this point. I'm so sorry, I got no idea. I've mixed up all my points. I've mixed them up. Right, we're on this one. So, Snowball and Napoleon start to disagree. Snowball sets up committees for the animals, which mostly fail. That's where we're at, and this is going to be the next one, I think. So, let's keep reading, and I'll point you back in the right direction. Make sure you've got the notes. So, I'll put them back on so you can pause this one. So you can pause it there. Reading and writing classes, however, were a great success. By the autumn, almost every animal on the farm was literate in some degree. So if you are literate, you are able to read and write. As for the pigs, they could already read and write perfectly. The dogs learned to read fairly well, but were not interested in reading anything except the 7 Commandments. Muriel, the goat, could read somewhat better than the dogs, and sometimes used to read to the others in the evenings from scraps of newspaper she found in the rubbish heap. Benjamin could read as well as any pig, but never exercised this faculty. So far as he knew, he said, there was nothing worth reading. Clover learnt the whole alphabet, but could not put words together. Boxer could not get beyond the letter D. He would trace out A, B, C, D in the dust with his great hoof, and then would stand staring at the letters with his ears back, sometimes shaking his forelock, trying with all his might to remember what came next, never succeeding. On several occasions, indeed, he did learn E, F, G, H, but by the time he knew them, it was always discovered that he had forgotten A, B, C, and D. Finally, he decided to be content with the first 4 letters and used to write them out once or twice every day to refresh his memory. Molly refused to learn any but the 5 letters which spell her own name, neatly out of pieces of twig, and then would decorate them with a flower or 2 and walk around them, admiring them. None of the other animals on the farm could get any further than the letter A. It was also found that the stupider animals, such as the sheep, hens and ducks, were unable to learn the 7 commandments by heart. After much thought, Snowball declared that the 7 commandments could in effect be reduced to a single maxim, namely, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Okay, so a maxim is a short statement expressing the truth, and that is finally where this point comes in. So, the literacy program. So a literacy program starts, but it's too hard for most of the animals, and so they've reduced the commandment down to this one maxim, this sort of one phrase: 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. So pause for a second, get that written down, and then move on. This, he said, contained the essential principle of animalism. Whoever had thoroughly grasped it would be safe from human influences. The birds at first objected, since it seemed to them that they also had 2 legs, but Snowball proved to them that it was not so. A bird's wing, comrades, he said, is an organ of propulsion and not of manipulation. It should therefore be regarded as a leg. The distinguishing mark of man is the hand, the instrument with which he does all his mischief. The birds did not understand Snowball's long words, but they accepted his explanation, and all the humbler animals set to work to learn the new maxim by heart. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad was inscribed on the end wall of the barn above the 7 commandments and in bigger letters. When they had once got it by heart, the sheep developed a great liking for this maxim, and often as they lay in the field, they would all be bleating, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and keep it up for hours on end, never growing tired of it. Napoleon took no interest in Snowball's committees. He said that the education of the young was more important than anything that could be done for those who were already grown up. It happened that Jessie and Bluebell were both whelped soon after the hay harvest, giving birth between them to 9 sturdy puppies. So whelped, they gave birth to puppies. That's literally what it means. As soon as they were weaned, Napoleon took the puppies away from their mothers, saying that he would make himself responsible for their education. So I want you to think back to one of Old Major's criticisms of man, was that man takes the animals' babies away from them very young. And this has happened again. He took them up to the loft, which could only be reached by a ladder from the harness room, and there kept them in such seclusion that the rest of the farm soon forgot their existence. The mystery of where the milk went was soon to be cleared up. It was mixed every day into the pigs' mash. The early apples were now ripening, and the grass of the orchard was littered with windfalls. The animals had assumed as a matter of course that these would be shared out equally. One day, however, the order went forth that all the windfalls were to be collected and brought to the harness room for the use of the pigs. At this, some of the other animals murmured, but it was no use. All the pigs were in full agreement on this point, even Snowball and Napoleon. Squealer was sent to make the necessary explanation to the others. Okay, so next point. You've got that Napoleon takes away the 2 litters of puppies to be educated. Okay, and we discover that the pigs are keeping the milk and apples for themselves. Okay, so they are the next 2 points to write down. So pause and write down those next 2 bits of information. Comrades, he cried, you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in the spirit of selfishness and privilege. Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. I dislike them myself. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. Milk and apples, this has been proved by science, comrades, contains substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organisation of this farm depends on us. Day and night we are watching over your welfare. It is for your sake that we drink the milk and eat those apples. Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. Yes, Jones would come back. Surely, comrades, cried Squealer, almost pleadingly, skipping from side to side. Right, let's go pause you there. So, I want you to look at the language a little bit that's being used here. I'm not going to spend lots of time dwelling on it. There's time for that. What do you think about, firstly, he's claiming that science has proven that milk and apples make the pigs more intelligent. I want you to just question to yourself, is that even true? Do you think that's true? And then look at the use of language here. Your welfare, for your sake. How is language there manipulated to try and make the animals feel like everything is being done for their own good? And then I've highlighted duty. I think at this point it might be worth you quickly pausing the video and having a little look back at the definition of duty. Okay? So pause the video now and have a look back at the definition of duty. Okay, so what is their duty? Are they fulfilling their duty now, or have they already failed in it? Okay, just things I want you to think about. Because what Squealer actually is he is a spin doctor. He is the spin doctor for Napoleon and Snowball, who have emerged as the leaders. And what the spin doctor is doing is he is spreading propaganda. So propaganda is your next keyword. And propaganda is misleading information to promote a political cause. So an example of propaganda, a really famous one, was during World War I, when soldiers were encouraged to sign up for the army and go to war under the promise that they'd be back by Christmas and that going to fight your country would be glorious and something to, a real honour and great fun. They go over, they shoot a German, have a jolly old time and be back in a couple of months. And that was propaganda. It wasn't true. It was misleading. And it was to promote the cause that the government needed people to go to war. Okay? So, that's propaganda. And a spin doctor is employed to speak on behalf of a political party. Basically, it's their job to make you agree with the politician. And they will do this through misleading choices of language, through propaganda, and through manipulation of the facts, and by the way that they phrase things to alter your thinking. So, thinking along those ideas, I think really interesting for you to look at the news now and see if you can see any examples of this, because there will be some false news out there that is certainly using propaganda, and at times you might even see news from the very highest sources. You might see speeches being given where actually language has been selected very, very carefully to try and reassure the British public that the government are doing what is best and their utmost. Sometimes that isn't supported by science or isn't supported by fact, but is the way that language has been manipulated. And so it's really important that we're aware of the way that the leadership of this country do work in doing that, because all politicians have spin doctors. Isn't to say that we can't trust anything they say. It's just that we need to be aware that they do it so that we question what they say if it doesn't feel right, rather than just accepting everything they're told. Okay, so let's see where we're going here. So,
Oh, and here, look, this is another good example of what is often done, especially when you've got a sort of a totalitarian or a tyrannical leader. As we can sort of see, the pigs are becoming quite tyrannical. It's totally becoming totalitarian. That sort of the idea that, you know, there really is no democracy. What they say goes, and they'll lead through fear, and that's what the pigs are starting to do. So you need to do as we say, because what's the worst consequence that could happen if you don't? Well, Jones might come back, and wouldn't that be terrible for you? Okay, ruling through fear. That's what a tyrant does. Surely there is no one among you who wants to see Jones come back. Now, if there was one thing that the animals were completely certain of, it was that they did not want Jones back. When it was put to them in this light, they had no more to say. The importance of keeping the pigs in good health was all too obvious, so it was agreed without further argument that the milk and the windfall apples, and also the main crop of apples when they ripened, should be reserved for the pigs alone. Okay, right, there will be a couple of extension tasks put on ePraise as well. Remember to do your quiz at the end, either in your booklet or on the electronic version if you want, or in your exercise or notebook. Again, that is linked through ePraise. Mark it with your green pen. There are the answers also provided on ePraise, and yeah, the extension task will be there too. And otherwise, don't forget, tomorrow, lesson 4, chapter 4. Thank you.